Hello, good evening, and welcome to What's Your Temperament and Why It Matters. I'm your host here tonight. I'm Danielle Bean, host of the Girlfriends Podcast. And joining me are two special friends and presenters, Rose Sweet. Welcome, Rose. Glad you're here.
Me too.
Yeah, thrilled to have you. And Kathleen Lewis. Welcome, Kathleen. So glad you're with us.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And you know what? I'm thrilled that you all are here as well. Thrilled to see you joining us here tonight. Thank you for making the time to be here. If you've joined a Good Catholic series before, we want to welcome you back. We're thrilled that you're coming back and participating in our unique brand of community here at Good Catholic. But if you're a first-time attendee at one of these events, we want to give you a special welcome. We are thrilled you're here. We're thrilled you're taking the time for this because it truly is important for us to be connecting with one another, growing in communication and in community as Catholics, talking about the things that really matter. And here, this topic about temperaments is a fascinating. I can't wait to dive into this. And it might seem like a little bit lighter fare to you to be talking about the temperaments rather than some deep theology lesson, which we do sometimes at Good Catholic as well. But I find that this topic is something that can really help us to know ourselves in the way that God intends for us to know ourselves so that we might grow in holiness. So I'm really looking forward to what our presenters have to share here. But also, you're a part of this conversation too. So I see plenty of people are already joining us in the chat. They're already going. Love to see it. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that. Let us know where you are joining from. I see people from New Hampshire. Welcome. I'm from New Hampshire too. We've got people from Maryland, California, Maine, North Carolina. We are thrilled that you are here joining us tonight. So get yourself familiar with that chat feature because as the evening goes on, I'm going to want you to be using that. So you can ask questions in the chat as the presenters are sharing or as we're having conversations among the presenters here. You have an opportunity to just type in your question. If somebody's presenting and you think, you know what, I wonder what she means by that, or I wonder about this particular situation in my life, how that might apply. Go ahead and type your question in that chat box because we have people who are moderating the comments there and they're collecting the questions. And at the end of tonight's event, the last part of this session, we're going to be going through with a live Q&A. So I'll be presenting your questions to our presenters for their feedback. So using that throughout the evening. Also, during the event tonight, you are going to see pop up on your screen occasionally poll questions, some little quiz questions, things to keep you engaged in thinking about the topic of temperaments. And I want to encourage you to participate in those because, first of all, you're going to learn a little something or quiz your knowledge a little bit. But also, at the end of tonight, we're going to have a giveaway. We're going to have two special prizes that we're giving away. And the way that you get entered in that random drawing for two special prizes we're giving away at the end of tonight's event is to participate in those polls and quizzes. So when you do that, you will be automatically entered for that random drawing at the end. And I'll give more information about that at the end of tonight's session. So before each of our presenters presents, I'm going to share a little bit more about them because we're thrilled to have these special experts that are here to share about the temperaments. Just before we came on, we were chatting, among us here before we went live, and we were just geeking out. I mean, it was really fun. These ladies talk about the temperaments. This is such a fascinating topic, and I know you're going to love hearing from them. So our first presenter tonight is going to be Rose Sweet, and I'm just going to share a little bit about Rose before we dive into what she has to share with us here tonight. So Rose is a conference speaker, a retreat leader, and a certified coach who's authored 14 books on healing and strengthening relationships. Since her youth, she's been curious and passionate about the deepest longings of the human heart and what makes people do the things they do or don't do. Rose discovered the classic 4 temperaments in the 60s when she taught, wrote about it, and time-tested it for over 4 decades. We are thrilled to have Rose Sweet joining us here tonight. She's a Catholic life coach, and as I mentioned, a well-renowned author on many different topics, including the temperaments. Please join me in welcoming Rose Sweet.
Wow, you make me sound so good, Danielle. I'm up to that, but I'll try.
Looking forward to it.
I have a special little slide presentation that I brought this evening, thanks to your prompting. But I first got so excited about the temperaments because I always used to think that everybody else was wrong and I was right. And if they could just be more like me, everything would be great. And I know some of you have probably thought that along the way as well. And with God's grace, I began to figure this out. First, starting to change others, but then realizing I needed to change myself. I needed to change my attitude. This is part of our spiritual growth. This is part of our walk as a human person to be integrated. So temperaments may sound like a pop psychology kind of thing on the surface, and it can be reduced to that, but is much more, as Danielle said, it's much more, it's a wonderful spiritual aid. So let's dive in and let me know if you can see my slides. I just want to make sure, can somebody just holler at me and let me know that everything is working okay? Danielle, can you, one of the presenters or something, pitch in, or am I the only speaker?
You're the only speaker, but we see your presentation.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So here we go. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, first discovered the 4 temperaments 350 years before Jesus. I know that Jesus knew about the temperaments. And, you know, we only have about 20 minutes here tonight, so I'll just keep moving with that. But this is really fun and interesting. The study of temperaments has been a Catholic spiritual aid for centuries. A lot of the saints have said, know yourself, know yourself. Why? So that we can see, understand, and love God better, understand how we're made in his image, and ultimately to then love other people. So this is a really good tool. So a couple little things out of the way. First of all, personality is different than temperament. Personality you can develop. You can choose or not choose. You learn behaviors and you put them on to serve you in certain situations. But temperament is the raw material. It's the natural default of how God wired you, and it's his gift to you. So take a screenshot or whatever you can do. This is a really condensed way of really understanding the temperament. Your temperament is primarily how you're hardwired to respond to life. And it's in the speed of your response, the intensity of your response, the duration of your response, and the direction of your response. Let me give you an example. If I were going to punch somebody, I'm a boxer, I'm not angry. How quickly, with what force, and how long am I just going to do it once, or going to just, pummel them? And what's my direction? Is it outward or is it kind of an inward action? So same thing with a hug. How quickly are you able to reach out and give somebody a hug? And how hard and tight do you hug them? What's the intensity? And how long does that hug last? And what's the direction? Is it you just pulling them in, or are you kind of pushing them away? So it's quick and slow, light and easy, deep, short-lived, enduring, extroverted, introverted. Remember, we can all respond in all these ways. In different circumstances, when we think about it and we have the time to think about it and we carefully choose that way. But temperament is when you don't have the time to think and you're automatic. This is how I roll. I wait and I'm careful, or I move in very quickly. Both of those can be good. Both of those might be a weakness. Let's see. So the primary responses of the 4 temperaments, the sanguine response is quick, it's light, it's short-lived, and they're an extrovert. Everything is outward and expressive. The choleric is also an extrovert, moving quickly, but with a more deep response and a more enduring response. The 2 extroverts on the top are natural extroverts, but they can learn to be introverted if they have to, but this is, again, their default. The 2 bottom ones are the introverts. The phlegmatic is a peaceful, gentle, loving soul who is slow and careful in their responses. They're not knee-jerk. They watch and they observe and then they move, which in a lot of cases, I wish I had been more like that. Their responses are light, short-lived, and they're a natural introvert. The melancholy also slow and careful to respond, deep and purposeful, enduring introvert. They're all wonderful. None of the 4 is superior to the other in any way, shape, or form. We need all of you. We need all of us. Let's take a quick look, because I know Kathleen in her presentation is going to talk more about the strengths and weaknesses of the four and their combinations. So just briefly, so if those of you who are not too familiar with four temperaments, the sanguine is quick, light, short-lived, sweet. They're silly, they're creative, they're spontaneous, they're sunny and optimistic and bright. They're very childlike, and they're a natural extrovert. The choleric and the sanguine are similar because they're both outgoing by nature, but the choleric is more intense. They're about the task. They're task-oriented. They take charge. They love to work, work, work. Now, don't we all love to work on the things that we like and we have the time and space to? But the choleric is ordered primarily to the task. And sometimes they're tough. They're very confident, but sometimes they can crush you. I know because part of me is a choleric. The beautiful, enduring melancholy is passionate and creative with very high standards and very good morals and by nature, and they're self-sacrificing, and they're an introvert. They carry things inside. They're very deep and very loving. The melancholy, by the way, is the one who will go to the cross for you quickest and without hesitation. But first you have to earn their trust. But more on that later. And last but not least, the beautiful, gentle, well-rounded phlegmatic is slow in their response and short-lived, easygoing. They're very adaptable. They're supportive, they're well-balanced, and they're a natural introvert. Do you see yourself in any of these? Here's a quick little chart I like. The primary emotional needs. Now, we all need food, clothing, shelter, love, and all safety and all that. But the sanguine really wants attention. They are all about, look at me. Look at me. Am I cute? Am I funny? Am I silly? Am I smart? I don't care. I want the attention, even if it's negative attention. And the choleric is more about appreciation and loyalty. Obey me. Listen to me. Follow me. I want your good. I know how to solve the problem. I'm telling you, do what I tell you, and everything will be okay. Why are you running away like that? The melancholy is, don't ever betray me. The melancholy wants to be understood really more than the others. Do you see me? Do you get me? I have a lot of value and a lot of depth, and I will love you to the death, but don't betray me. I'll forgive you because God says I have to, but I'll never forget. So maybe you know somebody like that, and maybe you are like that. And then finally, again, last but not least, but I'm going counterclockwise, is the beautiful phlegmatic who wants respect and peace. Please value me, says the phlegmatic. You know, I'm not out there doing 10 million things all the time like the choleric, and I'm not tap dancing to get everybody's attention. And maybe I'm not as deep as the melancholy, but I have goodness, and I'm smart, and I have value, and I want you to see that. So, you know, there's always somebody in a family that's like that, and sometimes they get overlooked. So let's talk about introverts and extroverts. This is a big myth, as the deeper that I got into this, and I hope Kathleen agrees with me, that introverts and extroverts can actually look the same. And this is why I have a picture of a bossy extrovert and a bossy introvert. Because yes, introverts can be loud and domineering and bossy, but they don't default to that quickly. The introvert first looks around, sees who's in the room, what's going on. If they feel safe, they feel familiar, they're comfortable, and they understand that they are needed to step up to the plate and take charge, then they do, and they look just like an extrovert. They have all the skills and all the ease and all the confidence of being like the extrovert. But when that task is over, when the need is gone, then they will go back down to their natural introverted position, which is to hold their cards close to their vest and to watch and wait and see and be careful instead of, you know, the knee jerk. So do you know anybody like this? Everyone is a natural combination of two. You're not just sanguine or choleric, even though we start with showing those four basics, but they're meant to be complementary and they come in pairs, like male and female. So this is a quick little way of seeing what you might be. But I know Kathleen agrees with me. Don't be too quick to put a label on yourself or other people. This is not a fun little magazine quiz. This really requires a lot of depth and research to really understand it. If you get it wrong, and you get yourself wrong or others wrong, you could do more harm than good. I've done that myself. So let's look at these two opposites. The sanguine, the playful sanguine, and the perfect melancholy are opposites. You cannot be both of these. So the first one, and again, there's more words, more descriptions, and these are very, very brief, but would you fall generally into one of these two categories? Outgoing, naturally outgoing, immediately, without thinking, loud, fast, silly, childlike, naive, shallow, sparkly, fun, quickly moved and excited, charming, flirty, loves everybody a little too quickly and then forgets you when you're gone? Or are you more like the perfect melancholy, who's intentional and thoughtful and purposeful and creative and sacrificing and passionate and dedicated and critical, slow to trust, but when their love is deep and enduring, they never, ever forget you? Let's look at the next two. So if you've got one of those, you've also got one of these, but you can't have all four. You can't have three, only two, and you can't be the opposite. The powerful choleric is fast-moving, loud, naturally confident, vocal, highly productive, take charge, sees the big picture, is often intolerant of others, and sometimes very unsympathetic. They don't like to wallow in emotions. They have a job that needs to be done. Or the opposite, peaceful phlegmatic, is steady, adaptable, considerate, cautious, careful, supportive, devoted, inventive, persistent, unruffled, and patient. And they can be hard workers and good leaders. Peaceful phlegmatics, although they're an introvert, many of our past presidents are phlegmatic, have part phlegmatic temperament. Our Pope is a phlegmatic melancholy. So leadership is not relegated to only the outgoing extroverted types. Many, many introverts are good, steady, solid, consistent, reliable leaders. Okay, let's talk about gender roles before we wrap up here. And this is so important. Look at these words here on your screen. Gentle, kind, respectful, supportive, patient, nurturing, healing, peacemaker, calming. In our culture, we tend to say, is this male or female? And everybody goes, female. But don't you know some men who are like that too? Men who are naturally gentle and kind and nurturing and calming. They're not the loud, crashing, macho man type, but they're every bit a man. The expected gender roles, again, look at these words: initiator, courageous, bold, fast acting, high energy, take charge, dynamic, builder, challenging, conquering. Well, most people go masculine, male. Well, no, not always, because we have a lot of beautiful, feminine, sweet, adorable women who are born with this kind of temperament. Peter Kraft, one of my wonderful favorite Catholic authors, and I hope you've read him. If you haven't, please do. He's easy to read and very deep theologically. He says male and female are biological. Masculine and feminine are cosmological. So you can have I have a very masculine temperament because I am part choleric. I've been told by some people, you're more of a man than some men. And I used to take pride in that, but now I'm like, no, you get it wrong. I don't want to be a man. I don't want to compete with men. I'm a woman and I love being a woman, but I have a strong, take charge, high energy, masculine temperament. My husband, on the other hand, is every bit a man that a man could be, and I love him to death, and I defer to him many times, but he is the more soft, gentle, kind, sweet, adaptable, nurturing person more than I am by his temperament. Now imagine as a little boy who has a soft, gentle, quiet, kind temperament, noticing around him he's not like those other boys and thinking, maybe I'm a girl. Maybe I am trapped in a body, a male body. Maybe I'm a female. It may be he has a feminine temperament that has nothing to do with biology. Masking. Here's another important thing that I hope you understand when you get into taking these tests. And I've taken a lot of tests where I know you can manipulate tests all day long. You can answer the way you want to be, or the way your mom told you should be, or how you hope to be. But getting in touch with the reality is really important. Masking happens when we hide or deceive who we really are because we're afraid of rejection. When we hide or deceive who we really are because we don't want to be that. I have a girlfriend who she's so phlegmatic. She's so kind and supportive and loving, and she avoids conflict and she brings peace wherever she goes, but she wants to be choleric. And she tries so hard to be choleric. And I make decisions and I work hard. I go, I know you do, but your gifts are in the phlegmatic area. So she doesn't want to be phlegmatic, so she will sometimes try to be choleric, and it's a mask. It's hiding the maximum of her natural beauty. Sometimes when we mask out of love, it can be a virtue. Masking out of love can be a virtue. That means I can look around the room. If I'm a take charge choleric, I know exactly what needs to be done, and I can quickly step up and take over and shape everybody up. But I know it's not my responsibility. God doesn't call me to it. And that's my own little ego or my fears. And so I put a mask on and I don't say a word, and I don't step up and take charge like I normally would. That's part of grace and maturing and discernment. So masking is hiding who we are, our natural default. When we're hiding it out of fear, it's a weakness. And when we're hiding it out of virtue, it's a strength. So what can shape our natural temperament? Our natural temperament is the raw material, like this raw piece of marble. And I'm sure many of you have heard the story about Michelangelo. I don't know if it's true, but we keep perpetuating it, that he once looked at a raw piece of marble and said, there's an angel in there and I must set her free. So he started carving and shaping the raw material to this beautiful product. And that's what God wants to do with us, is take our natural temperament. And although the culture and sin and fears and anxiety and all kinds of things, abuse and trauma can hurt our temperament and cause it to work in a weak position, grace and virtue and maturity and discernment and education can take it in another way and shape it to its most beautiful. So it's a lot in a little short time. I hope you've gotten a good little overview from my perspective. I love to teach this and share this with anybody who's interested in more. I think it's just one of the funnest things ever, and it's really, really helped me in my life. So I'm just going to end with this. Remember, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Whatever your natural temperament is, this is what God designed and ordered for you, and He has plans for you. So you are wonderfully made, and so is everybody else. Don't try to shape them up. Yes, if they're in sin or have a lot of vices, focus on that, but not the temperament. The temperament is God's gift to them. So there you have it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rose. That was such a great kind of overview, and I hope people were beginning to see some of yourselves in those different descriptions of the temperaments. I especially loved, Rose, you talking about that masking, like where it can be a negative thing, but it could also be a virtue, because I think that's part of what I find, just knowing temperaments and kind of learning my own natural tendencies kind of leads me toward, is seeing the ways in which that's a strength and I should play to that, but then also some of the ways in which I'm not called to use that part of my personality right now, right? So that's a beautiful way of looking at it, because I think, when we hear the word mask, we think, well, that must always be negative. And yet if you do it out of love, it can truly be a virtue. So that's part of what
maybe we could call it a veil. For when it's a good, it's a veil.
I like that. Yes, it can be a great virtue to kind of hold back in that way. And a lot of what you were describing, I was thinking about our experience of parenting, and we'll get into more of this maybe in the Q&A session when we can talk about the temperaments in parenting and how you parent your kids, and some of those things, like you were saying, you want to step in and do the whole thing. Well, maybe that's not the best thing to do, and out of love you could hold back. So Margot's asking to show the slide with the longer description of the temperaments again, please. You know what, we'll make sure to I don't know if you can do that easily right now, Rose, but we'll make sure to do that. We'll make sure that everybody, first of all, everyone's going to get a recording of this whole session. So everyone who's participating here is going to get that. But we'll make sure that you get access to those slides as well.
Good.
Okay. I want to remind people, I'm seeing lots of questions coming through. I want to remind you to please be doing that as we're going, because we are going to have that time for Q&A with our presenters who are experts in this field. And this is your chance. Find out what do you want to know about the temperaments? What do you want to know about your own natural tendencies? I also want to encourage you to be participating in the quizzes and polls that are going to be popping up on your screen, because that's how you get entered in our giveaway. Before we move on to our second presenter, Kathleen Lewis here, I just want to share what those giveaway items are going to be. So first of all, because it's the Feast of Our Lady, today is a beautiful feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we are going to be giving away a beautiful Mary wall plaque. You can see it above my shoulder here. And during the next session, I'll pull it down so I can bring it up and show it to you a little bit more clearly. It's beautiful, and it's available from the Catholic Company. It's a $44.95 value. It's a gorgeous item that you could have in your home to make every part of your home more Catholic. It's just a gorgeous thing to have in your home and remind you of our Blessed Mother. So we're going to be giving away one of those to one lucky randomly drawn winner at the end of tonight's session. And also, the other thing that we're going to be giving away is a new offering that we're going to have at Good Catholic. It's not quite available yet. It is up and coming. Later this week, you're going to hear more about it. And we're calling it Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes. So in this experience, we're calling it, it's a little bit of a DIY retreat. So you're going to have access to our Lourdes series from Good Catholic, which is 13 sessions with Father Eckert, who is one of our most popular presenters, and he's going to be sharing about Lourdes and the miracles at Lourdes and the apparitions at Lourdes and the message that we receive from Our Lady at Lourdes when she was speaking and appearing to Bernadette. Also, as part of that Moments with Mary, you're going to be receiving a book, which is Miracles of Lourdes, which is written by Marlene Watkins, a beautiful book outlining modern day miracles that are related to the apparitions at Lourdes, that are related to images to Lourdes, healing miracles that are happening every day there. So a truly inspiring book. You're also going to get a downloadable discussion guide and a exclusive playlist from Good Catholic to help you in your Mary moments. So this Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes, is a wonderful way to spend a little time with Our Lady during these last few weeks of summer. It's an opportunity to go deeper in your relationship with Our Lady, focused on the apparitions at Lourdes. We're going to be giving away one of those to a lucky winner here tonight at the end of tonight's session, and also the wall plaque. So stay tuned for that. But now it's time for our second presenter. Our second presenter here tonight is Kathleen Lewis. And let me tell you a little bit more about Kathleen. By the grace of God, Kathleen shares her life with her husband, Craig, the 4 children that they were given to raise, and the 2 children raising them all from heaven. Under the mentorship of an amazing pastor, Kathleen served her parish as a DRE and then youth minister before her family demands signaled a change in calling. As a homeschooling mother, she taught numerous co-op classes, co-authored the Catholic Classical Enrichment Program, and created 2 middle school history video series available through Tan Academy. Kathleen has spoken to women's groups about sacred scripture and various papal encyclicals. Fascinated by the history and wisdom of the temperaments, she has shared the fruits of her study through semester-long courses for Mary's Women of Joy, as well as day-long retreats for parish staff and Catholic high school faculty. For the last 3 years, Kathleen has co-hosted the Catholic radio show Joyful Echo. We are so happy to have Kathleen Lewis joining us here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Kathleen.
Thank you, Danielle. What a wonderful introduction. I can agree with Rose that it is a little humbling to hear yourself introduced in that way. And like Rose, I'm hoping that you all will let me know if you are not seeing the slides. So thank you all for your attention tonight. After such a clear presentation about the 4 temperaments from Rose, you will likely recognize each one of them in these photos. We can see a strong choleric woman in that top left corner. Right beside her are calm, phlegmatic man, very masculine, but calm. On the bottom row, we can see the melancholic man, very focused on some detail-oriented project that he has going on. And then beside him are sanguine ladies, because how could I present just one sanguine all by her lonesome? That wouldn't be right at all, would it? Without even taking an assessment, and there are some good and some not so good ones out there. I would recommend, by the way, one at temperamentquiz.com that Dr. Art Bennett and Lorraine Bennett put together. I think that one is excellent. But even without taking that assessment, most people recognize that they don't have just one temperament. As Rose mentioned, we are a combination. So if we ask ourselves, can I be more than one temperament? Yes, not maybe, but definitely you are a combination of 2 temperaments, but not in the same proportion. Sometimes it's almost 50-50. One might be slightly more the primary or dominant temperament. For other individuals, it might be as extreme as this photo. This was taken, this is my youngest in the picture. This was taken at an illusion museum that we have here in my hometown. And I thought it was a fun illustration of how one temperament can be so much larger in a person than the other. So that primary temperament, you may feel from Rose's description that one of those primarily resonated in your experience, and at the same time there might be 1 or 2 things, 2 elements of that just didn't resonate in the same way. Likely that's because in that area, your secondary temperament is really more at play. Now, not all of the temperaments can be paired together. They are, as Rose said, complementary. So let's take a look at what some of those combinations are. So if your dominant or primary temperament is sanguine, you could have a secondary temperament that might be choleric, or a secondary phlegmatic temperament. And although each combination has the same primary temperament in those 2 examples, someone with a phlegmatic secondary temperament likely is going to prioritize people to a much stronger degree than someone with a sanguine primary temperament and a task-driven choleric secondary temperament. That's just one example of the difference between those 2 secondaries. Now, someone with a primary phlegmatic temperament could have, as a secondary temperament, a melancholic, which would emphasize the internal processing quality that is common to both of those temperaments. When Rose was talking about the direction of the temperament, if it's internal or external, for both the phlegmatic and the melancholic temperaments, it's internal. Okay, not only can this phlegmatic person have a melancholic secondary temperament, but he or she could also have a sanguine secondary temperament, in which case the individual would likely be much more extroverted as opposed to that introverted phlegmatic melancholic. Now, with a melancholic primary temperament, that could be paired with a secondary choleric temperament. That would be my husband's combination. So I'm partial to this one. I love this one. This combination gets a double dose of being task-oriented. But a melancholic primary temperament could also have a phlegmatic secondary temperament. And a person with this combination may take some extra understanding to be coaxed out of the comfort of his or her internal world. Finally, the person with a choleric primary temperament can be choleric sanguine, in which case there's a nice balance of a task orientation, but also a recognition that there are people priorities too. This person is likely going to be quite extroverted in leadership. So you will see a more extroverted kind of leader here. Whereas the choleric with a melancholic, who could also likely be a very strong and powerful and effective leader, is also going to be a powerhouse problem solver, whether in leadership or not. Now, each temperament brings with it certain gifts. And those gifts are really glimpses into a facet of the perfections of God. Harnessed by grace, these powerful gifts glorify our Heavenly Father by fulfilling their purpose, the purpose of each of those temperament gifts that we have. But warped and untethered from grace, they can speak not of the glory of God, but only of our human limitations, specifically our fallen human limitations. Tonight, I really would like to focus on the gifts as God intended them to be. Now, certainly during the Q&A, we can talk about some of those challenges that we face when our temperament becomes warped or untethered from grace, what that can look like. But I really want to focus on the gifts. People with a sanguine temperament live in the moment. They are naturally optimistic, both about people themselves, right, or situations. So a sanguine thinks everything is going to work out just fine. And oftentimes it does for them, right? They express and they understand ideas most easily through stories. And therefore they are great storytellers. They're very entertaining storytellers. Their stories may not always be as accurate as the best newspaper, but they will be engaging. They're also motivated by people and fun. People who have a phlegmatic temperament are internal processors. They need to think in order to have something to say. They're naturally content. They are fantastic mediators and excellent shepherd leaders. They are motivated by calm and harmony. The gifts of a melancholic temperament include the natural ability to think analytically and creatively. Sometimes, unfortunately, people fail to recognize the creativity that's inherent in people with melancholic temperaments. But it's there. And sometimes even if you have that temperament, it may be a little later in life before you recognize it yourself. But look for it if you haven't yet. People with this temperament easily identify problems and they are adept at solving them. I talk about the melancholic Pac-Man. It just goes through all those little Pac-Man dots are like problems, and they just go through and eat them up, and it makes them so satisfied. They are reliable, dependable, and loyal. They are task-oriented. And people with a melancholic temperament are motivated by ideals, right? How things should be. And also they're motivated by order. Now, a choleric temperament brings with it the gift of being able to act and control emotions under pressure. If you're in a building and the fire alarm goes off and there's one person telling everyone where to run, chances are that person has a choleric temperament and you should probably follow him or her to the safest exit, because this person is not going to be overwhelmed by emotions in that kind of situation. It shields the person from discouragement, especially when it's paired with that sanguine secondary temperament, Remember that the sanguine is naturally optimistic. So you put the can-do choleric with the naturally optimistic sanguine, sky's the limit, nothing's going to get in her way or his way. A person with a choleric temperament is decisive, resourceful, very persuasive. When it's untethered by grace, it can look like bulldozing, but harnessed by grace, it's persuasion. It's persuasion. He or she is motivated by control and power, though the person who has the choleric temperament does not need to be the person with all the power or who's in control, in charge. The choleric person just needs to know that there is a person who is supposed to be in charge and that that person is competent. And if he or she feels that way about the designated leader, he or she will be just fine following the direction of that individual. That authority will absolutely be respected. Now, when I first learned about the temperaments, it was from a wonderful woman who explained how understanding the temperaments helped her marriage. And I had to laugh when Rose was talking about her own experience of recognizing that, hey, everybody else isn't wrong. They just have a different temperament, because that's how this woman explained her experience with the temperaments. She said, before I knew about my husband's temperament, I just thought he was wrong. And so understanding the temperaments had a very practical, positive effect on her marriage, and it still does. I still know her. In fact, interacting with someone of a different temperament can sometimes feel like meeting with or speaking to an alien. Why does she do that? I cannot for my life understand why he ... At the same time, God in his providence often introduces a spouse or children who have radically different temperaments than our own, to say nothing of the neighbors and the coworkers in our lives. So, how do we love these people the way we want to love them? What is the way that God wants us to love them? Give me some tips. All right. First, we must remember that God does want us to love them. It's a base requirement for us as Christians. It's not an option. In his book, The Sanctifier, the late Archbishop of Mexico expressed the Christian duty of charity in this way. We Christians have to love without exception the persons for whom we feel sympathy and those for whom we feel a natural repugnance. We have to love the good and the bad, friends and enemies. Charity does not admit exceptions. We must pray for those who persecute us and do good to those who harm us, as it says in Matthew's gospel. Now, in our fallen nature, we can try to mitigate the parts of a person's temperament that are different from our own. We can convince ourselves that we are motivated by love when we try to change those aspects of our spouse, our sibling, or child. One advice gem that I received came to me from Father Alfonso Gomez. He told me and others at the time, a human person is a mystery to be reverenced, not a project to be fixed. Okay, so what does love look like in the context of someone with a different temperament? Well, first and foremost, it is Christ-like. It is sacrificial, and it necessitates dying to ourselves, to our own egos. We love with the awareness that God loved us first. We receive that love and return it to him by loving what and whom he loves. When our love flows through our love for God, it has an unchanging basis. It is not dependent on how the other person behaves or whether we find him or her to our liking. And here are those practical tips for what it might look like in a day-to-day life for each temperament. Keep in mind that people with a primary sanguine temperament need to be with other people. They speak and understand the language of people and fun. Even if it seems unnecessary to you with your temperament, make it a point of seeing, paying attention, and affirming the people you love who have sanguine temperaments. Communicate that you accept them without their need to change. If you have a lovely phlegmatic person in your life, recognize and respect their need for calm. They speak the language of harmony and people. Be attuned to what they experience as conflict. It may be very different from what you experience as a moment of conflict. Communicate that you value their input and seek it, even if often it seems they don't have an opinion or a preference. Still, the next time, seek their opinion, ask their preference. People with a melancholic temperament need order and safety around them. They will speak the language of ideals, the right way, the perfect way, the way it should be, and order. Be sensitive to their tendency towards self-criticism. It will be most appreciated if you put in the work to understand that person with the melancholic temperament. Be generous with the space that they need to process their thoughts and to recharge. Loving a person with a choleric temperament means recognizing their need for loyalty and the acknowledgement of their work or contributions. They will speak the language of power and control, but again, it doesn't mean that they have to be in charge. Sometimes the traits and behaviors of a choleric temperament can present in such a large way that the secondary temperament seems almost non-existent. Recognize the gifts that temperament has, that secondary temperament, as well as the primary temperament, the strength of the choleric. Remember that people with a choleric temperament do not naturally perceive conflict as dangerous or hurtful. In fact, for many individuals with a choleric primary temperament, especially when they're young, what other temperaments might describe as arguments, for them it's sport. It's like puppies that are play fighting. They're not really hurting each other, and they certainly don't want to hurt each other. But if you have a primary choleric in your life, sometimes they might try and do that puppy fighting with you. And if you're a different temperament, you do experience it as a hurtful experience or something that's dangerous and maybe even scary. It's my sincere prayer that this information is a help for you, a help to be able to grow in appreciation for the loving gift that is your temperament, and also in your charity toward your neighbor. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was beautiful and a beautiful supplement to what Rose just shared with us, sort of the overview of the temperaments, but you kind of gave us a review of that. But also I loved how you kind of broke down how to love people with these different temperaments. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one that was thinking of a particular person every everyone. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what he needs. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Oh my gosh, I love that. So we're getting lots of great questions. I can't wait to get to our Q&A session. But before that, I just want to ask each of you, maybe we can talk a little bit about this, because this is a question that I kind of come to with the temperaments, is the idea of, you were talking about like embracing who you are, like I am fearfully and wonderfully made, right? But like, is there a point at which you might be called to, or is it advisable to think about overcoming your temperament, like the ways that some people might tend to see it as a weakness? I'm thinking of my husband, for example, whenever we take these quizzes, and he's a choleric, melancholic, and he will always say, I'm all the bad ones, right? Like that's, he kind of puts that value judgment on it, right? Like he knows
It's
like
that sensitivity, right? The
yeah,
self-criticism.
exactly.
Yes.
Yes. So maybe Kathleen, maybe you could share just a little bit about that idea of overcoming your temperament. Is that something that's even advisable to do? How should we approach that when we see it as a weakness
Right.
in some way?
Sure. And Rose, please feel free when I'm finished if there are things that need to be added. But I would really love to hear people talk about overcoming their vices, but not overcoming their temperaments, because your
Yes.
I like that.
temperament was given to you, especially you, for the mission, the unique mission that God has for you. And he wants you to be that melancholic temperament. Tell your husband, like, he gave it to you on purpose. It's wonderful. Now, your vices, that's another matter. You absolutely have to struggle to overcome your vices. And I promise you, any temperament can and has become a saint. And every temperament can potentially lose salvation. So there isn't a good temperament, as Rose said, or a holy temperament. They all have that possibility.
What do you say,
That
Rose?
was beautifully said, Kathleen. Thank you very much for that. It is vice. It's not the temperament. And let's just briefly talk about what that means. Is each of the 4 temperaments has a specific desire. And if they don't get that desire, they get afraid because they don't trust God or they don't trust whatever. So you have a desire that doesn't get met, and then you're fearful or angry or depressed, and now you're in a weak position, and your strengths, your temperament is not operating in strengths, but in weaknesses. And that's where laziness and domination and flightiness and all the weaknesses are really the strengths covered up by fear. It's really the weaknesses are strengths that are covered up and morphed by fear. So it's doing that deep work of the interior life. What do I want? What am I afraid of? Who do I really trust? You will, if you answer those properly as Catholics, you'll be functioning in your strengths. Otherwise, you're going to be recycling in your weaknesses. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I wonder if you could give us an example of that, Rose, where you're talking about like we have strengths that can sort of be manifested as weaknesses if they're used improperly.
Well, here's one of the quickest examples I've always given. The sanguine storyteller learns by stories, but loves to tell stories and is really good at telling stories. But if I'm at a cocktail party and I'm telling a fabulous story that everybody comes over and listens and laughs, and I go, this feels good, man. Okay. And then I tell another one and they're laughing and I'm like, and if I go, now my strength, if I'm afraid to lose that attention that's feeding my ego, then I'm going to keep going on and nobody else has a chance to tell a story. And now my strength has gone into a weakness out of fear of me losing something I really, really like and don't want to let go of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you know, Danielle, there's a great scriptural example of that too with St. Peter, right? When he's the one to say, you are the Messiah, right? You are the Son of God. He has that gift given to him by God. But then right after that, he's the stumbling block because he won't allow the Lord to serve the sacrificial purpose, you know? So the very thing that is our strength, that it was given to us as a gift, can become an obstacle if it's not harnessed by grace.
Well, and at the root is, yes, at the root is fear. And this is why God says so many times, fear not, fear not, fear not. Perfect love casts out fear. So what we want, we start with temperaments, but ultimately they're either shaped by love or they're shaped by fear.
That's so beautifully put. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I'm fascinated by the idea of how this can apply to our spiritual lives. You know, I read a book by Art and Lorraine Bennett, who are a great Catholic couple who write a lot about the temperaments, a lot of their books. And we've got some of those that we can share in the chat box for those of you who are interested in checking those out. But and I remember when I read one of them, so my primary temperament is phlegmatic. And I tended to see it mostly as a strength, mostly I like being a peacemaker, I value that about myself. But when I read one of those books, and it was kind of leading into like what some of our spiritual weaknesses might be, kind of the flip side. And it was talking about how a phlegmatic might be tempted to go along with something that they ought not to go along with, right? Or not to speak out when they ought to speak out. And I really felt convicted by that. It was like a moment for me in my life, like, wow, yeah, I can see that I do have that tendency. So that's an example of how knowing yourself and really just bringing that knowledge of your natural gifts, your natural strengths to your spiritual life can really kind of hold up a mirror in a way that can really help you to be aware of it so that you can grow in holiness. What are your thoughts about that, Kathleen?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And Dr. Art and Lorraine Bennett, in their book, they have several sections where they talk about saints of different temperaments. I saw someone in the chat asking about that. And also recognizing that we can, based on our temperament, have certain predispositions toward certain vices. For instance, where a sanguine could be more vulnerable to vices like gluttony, and a melancholic likely is not. A choleric, unless a choleric sanguine, likely not as tempted by those creature comforts, because the sanguine does love some comfy clothes, some good food, some delicious wine. Those comforts are more tempting naturally to a sanguine. That doesn't mean that every sanguine has those kinds of vices, but there are some natural predispositions, as you said, and learning what they are can help us to guard a bit against them, but always with the moderation, as we spoke of earlier, of not trying to struggle against your temperament, struggle against the vice.
Right. So not becoming some different person, right? And fully embracing who you are, but being aware of the fact that you are uniquely vulnerable in some ways to certain vices. That's beautiful. Rose, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that very well said, Kathleen. And if you want to talk about the sanguine and the gluttony, again, that's a specific desire. And if the sanguine has that strong desire and is afraid of not getting it, they're going to hang on to it or seek after it or pursue it with a vengeance. And again, that's motivated by fear. So I think sin doesn't come from your temperament. I think sin comes from the mind, the heart, and the will, and it manifests through the temperament. I think your fear will show up as laziness or domination of others, or of pulling away and going into the cave for 100 years. That is how the fear will manifest itself through the four temperaments. The fear and the vice.
I find too that it is a powerful motivator for me to recognize that connection between an individual not having his or her needs met and their movement into the area of fear and then vice. Because if I love someone, I want the good, the eternal and the salvific good for that person. And that individual is much more likely to be free to pursue it if his or her needs are being met. So if I love him, I'm going to try and make sure that those needs are met in our interactions anyway, as much as I can, so that he is free to be all the gifts that come with his temperament.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love the kind of framing of it in terms of how we can love people, right? And that's ultimately what we're called to do. So we want to know people's temperaments. We want to know how they feel known and seen and loved. And so it's all in those little details. So beautifully said. Okay, well, I want to get to people's questions, but first I want to remind you of the giveaway. We're giving away Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes, which is kind of that experience, which is a 13-part video series with Father John Eckert, who beautifully leads us through Lourdes and helps us to learn what we can learn about Mary's example and her teachings at Lourdes and those apparitions to Saint Bernadette all those years ago in Everyday Miracles. And that experience comes with a book too, which is Miracles of Lourdes, Everyday Miracles of Lourdes by Marlene Watkins. So that's an experience that we're going to be giving away. It's going to be available later this week. You're going to want to be watching your email. If you're part of this session, we promise we will let you know when that is available later this week if you don't happen to win that prize. The other prize we're giving away, I did take it off of my wall, this beautiful image of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which is just this beautiful wooden wall plaque. And it would grace any part of your home and help you to remember Our Lady. So on this feast day, we're happy to be giving away one of those as well. You have to stay until the end of the session to find out if you're one of those winners in that giveaway. But I want to get into our questions here. We've got people who've been sharing questions throughout, and I'm just going to work through. We may not get to all of them, but I'm going to go through as many of them as we can here. So this first question someone asked was, which temperament carries anger about the little things? Now, we all know what that kind of feels like. And maybe, Rose, do you want to take a stab at that first? Which of the temperaments would be kind of the grudge-holding, detail-noticing kind of temperament?
Okay, well, holding anger and holding a grudge are kind of different because the response, remember the responses, some of them are short-lived and some are enduring. As choleric can hold anger, but it's very quick. They solve it and then they're over with it. The melancholy will hold on to the anger longer because they hold on to love longer. They hold on to everything longer. They have a much more enduring response. I think everybody if you have a desire and it doesn't get met, you have a form of anger. And the phlegmatic will usually deny that they're angry or hope that they're not angry or ignore it. The choleric will give voice to it and let everybody know they're mad. The sanguine will pout and kick and scream and then make a joke because they think they looked really silly while they were kicking and screaming. And the melancholy will just sit there quietly and brood and go, what's wrong with you people? So I think that anger is a universal emotion and a universal response. I think we all carry it in different degrees and in different ways. Do you agree, Kathleen?
Yes, I definitely would agree. And I think going back to what Rose said in her presentation about the essence of each temperament is going to be important too, because sometimes we can get caught up and even distracted by certain behaviors and try and say, well, I'm this temperament because I behave this way. But at the essence, it really is about, when you're talking about holding on to anger, for instance, that's a duration issue, right? So the impression is made, how long do I hold on to it? So I am a primary choleric temperament. So that means that if I start talking to you, and I'm secondary sanguine, so I would tell you it in a story. If I start talking to you about some offense committed against me in high school, I'm not far into that story before I'm actually emotionally reliving that experience. I'm going to start to feel the same kind of anger and injustice of what was done to me as I did in that moment. Whereas one of my children who has a beautiful phlegmatic temperament, I would have to spend the same amount of time reminding him of that offense that was committed against him like a week ago, not years ago. So it's duration.
Yeah. So that's very interesting to think about the different temperaments and their responses to anger. Like we all experience it, right? But we all process it and express it in different ways. So, and it's not right or wrong, right?
Right,
I think that's something that's so key to loving people of different temperaments is, both of you mentioned like that idea of thinking other people are wrong, right? Just because they're viewing the world in a different way and experiencing it in a different way. So,
but let me qualify, because especially when we're talking, we are not talking about any person, no matter their temperament, who disrespects you, dishonors you, and abuses you. This is, you don't tolerate because that's their temperament. No, you don't tolerate that no matter where it comes from. So
That's a good clarification to make, Rose.
right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes. So we're
good.
saying this in the spirit of love, right? And assuming
Yes,
goodwill on both parts.
yes.
Right, right. Okay, well, I'm going to go to you first with this one, Kathleen. Someone's asking, what's the best way to leverage our temperaments to grow in holiness? So we've been talking about how we can have a vulnerability dependent upon our temperament, but what's the best way to leverage it as a real spiritual strength?
Okay, so I'm going to start with something really short, and then I'll elaborate a bit. And in honor of Our Lady, I'll quote her: "Pray and do whatever He tells you." Right? I mean, and that's kind of the short answer. So all of the aids that Mother Church offers us for growing in holiness, that is going to be how you leverage your temperament. I do think that there are certain practices, spiritual practices, that certain temperaments in general might find more beneficial than other temperaments. For instance, some dear friends of mine who have a primary sanguine temperament, they absolutely love praying together and out loud, and it's beautiful and it's edifying for them. I don't have the same experience when I am with them praying in that way. They have a very emotion-filled prayer experience. It is beautiful. It is spirit-led. I just start to sweat and think about how close somebody is, to me on either side. So, don't be afraid if there's a particular practice that is not resonating with you as edifying. Move on. Look elsewhere, because the riches of the church are vast and diverse.
I love that advice. So helpful, because I think sometimes we do get caught up. We might admire somebody's spirituality in some way and really want to emulate it ourselves. But then if it's not clicking with us or it feels uncomfortable, then you're so right. Move on. There's so much more, find what works for you. Rose, what would you say to that? How can we leverage our temperaments to grow in holiness?
I really can't add anything. That's exactly what I would say if I were Kathleen. But the church does have so much for us. But one of the things is to look at the ways we carry shame. Shame. I talked about fear, and now I'm going to talk about shame. When I look at all those holy, women doing that, thing that you're talking about, Kathleen, and I'm also like going, get me out of here, get me out of here. I can feel shame that I'm not like them. Mm-hmm. And so the whole comparison game that we know we can fall into, we need to be aware of that and avoid it and say, you know what, Lord, thank you for this beautiful gift of prayer that these women are enjoying. It's not my thing. Help me to find my thing if I don't already know what it is. But I don't have to be like you.
Right.
Part of me wants to be like you, but the rest is like, no.
It's never going to work, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of kind of faking it, we get a question more about the masking. One person asked, when we mask for almost all of our lives, and it is a virtue, is there a way to change? What might you say to that, Rose? Should somebody be masking for almost all of their lives? Would that really
No, and I do, because I do a lot of coaching. I deal with a lot of the mental, emotional, and psychological problems that come with and then overlay the temperaments. So you have to pull that stuff away to get to remember, the temperament is the raw material. If you're masking, you've probably been given the message directly or indirectly that you are not good enough, or you should be something else, or you're not going to be safe, you're not going to be loved, you're not going to fit in, whatever it is. And so many of us carry that because a parent told us, or a teacher told us, or our peers told us. And when we look to others to affirm our goodness and our value and our beauty, we're going to be putting on masks to make all those people happy. But when we look to the Lord and he says, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. I delight in you. You are safe with me. I made you melancholy. I made you phlegmatic. come to me. I just want to eat you up. You're so beautiful. That's the kind of God image that we need to have. Sadly, many of us don't have that.
Right, right. Kathleen, what might you say to that idea of kind of lifelong masking? It sounds sad to me.
Yeah, amen. I would say amen to everything that Rose said.
Mm-hmm.
God will fill all of those needs. Even as I spoke about meeting others' needs and recognizing the needs of their temperament when you're interacting with them, ultimately, it is God who is, he is where our needs are ultimately ordered. When other people in your life, your spouse, your friend, your children even, are interacting with you in a way that fills you and meets all of those needs in a temporal way, they're really only expressing and trying to point you to your Father in heaven, who can meet those needs perfectly and eternally. And no human being can do that.
Right. Amen. That's a God job. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such an important reminder. Okay, Kathleen, we got this one question I want to ask you about temperaments being compatible. Are there certain temperaments that are more compatible with one another? Do opposites attract? Do birds of a feather flock together? How does this work?
Right. And Rose, please feel free to correct me based on your experience, but I don't think that there are any naturally repelling temperaments, nor are there temperaments that are always going to go together, especially in a spousal relationship. I will say that certain combinations seem to have certain challenges in common that they need to address. But a person who is a choleric temperament can be happily, sacramentally married to someone of any of the other temperaments or the same temperament. And I could say that about any of the others. In my experience, we were talking about this a little bit before the show. In my experience, my choleric sanguine combination tends to buddy up with the opposite, the sanguine choleric combination. So those friends of mine, those good friends of mine, meet me on the fun and people side, but at the same time, they're not scared away by the big dragon of my of my choleric temperament either, because they understand it. It's more challenging for me, and this might just be my person, not my temperament necessarily. I am often challenged by the phlegmatic temperament. And maybe because of that, God gifted me with one child who has a phlegmatic temperament. And talk about making the mistake of thinking you know somebody's temperament, but you don't. So everyone else in our house has choleric either as a primary or a secondary. And this poor little lovely boy was given to our family. And even after learning about the temperaments, I thought I didn't recognize the phlegmatic in him. I thought that he had choleric in there as well. He could hold his own in a heated discussion, and sometimes he would have these flare-ups. And it wasn't until later that I learned that his flare-ups are different than my choleric ones. My choleric is like having your hand on the dial of a furnace. I can crank that heat all the way up, but I'm in control of that heat level. For my melancholic son, when he gets backed into a corner or feels backed into a corner, there's an explosion that he can't control either, and then he needs to leave the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's frightening for him too, whereas my cranked all the way up to 10 doesn't frighten me. So I was misreading that, and it's only now that in our relationship we're enjoying all the fruits of recognizing the gifts and the wonders of his temperament, that if I didn't have him as a child, I would have been missing out on lots of other people with that beautiful temperament who, prior to this, I was just like, get a spine. What's your problem? You're not going to stand up and, stand firm. I don't know what your deal is. Where's the passion? Where's the excitement? So
I love that. Do you have anything to add to that about compatibility between the temperaments, Rose?
I've observed for many years that when phlegmatics who love peace and they love calm and they bring peace and calm to the situation, when they have been abused or crushed by choleric parent or teacher or whatever, they may be so wounded they cannot marry another choleric. And I see a lot of phlegmatics who are married together. There is no choleric in the relationship. And the one who performs the higher drive necessity is the one who has the more melancholy, because melancholy and choleric are similar in their intensity. One being an introvert, one being an extrovert, but they have the similar intensity. So that's one thing I've observed. And again, it comes from woundedness and trauma that we carry and is played out in the temperament or the selection of another temperament.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so related to kind of this interaction and compatibility of the temperaments, we got a question where someone said, I feel like I am different temperaments around different people. I related to jumping in and taking charge when needed and enjoying it, but also stepping back and getting shy when someone else takes charge. What might be going on there, Rose?
That's a classic phlegmatic. If it's, well, I don't want to put that on this person, but the phlegmatic is so adaptable and so malleable and so open that when I think the comment was, when a leader is needed, that's the key. I'll be the leader, but then I'm going to go home and take a nap. And I liked it and I had a good time and I enjoyed it, but I chose it. Nobody pushed me up there. I thought about it. I watched it. I saw the need and I was more deliberate in my response and I chose the leadership position. But then other times when there's not a leader who's needed, I like to sit back and just watch. So that might be what's going on.
Yeah. What do you think, Kathleen?
I would just circle back to something we talked about earlier. Don't get too caught up in the behaviors. Go back to that essence, right? How is that impression made? And sometimes in my experience, it was helpful for me to think about how I was as a child before I was really intentional about trying to do the right thing or trying to have good manners. Or, I was just who I was, wide open. So that sometimes can help you get back to the essence of what your temperament really is.
Yeah, I find that interesting because I think it does reveal a lot. Thinking back to your childhood, maybe thinking back to like what kind of feedback you got from, your parents. What did they say about what kind of a child you were? Or, what did teachers say about how you behaved in the classroom or what your natural strengths were? Not that that's the be all end all, but that can kind of give you a clue into where you began and kind of what your natural tendencies were. Okay, next up, let's see. Oh, here's an interesting one. I'm going to go to you with this one, Kathleen. Someone's asking, how can a melancholic avoid falling into negativity and depression when we seem naturally disposed toward that? Oh, Eeyore. We love you, Eeyore.
Yes. And I have some wonderful melancholic temperaments in my life. Okay, so you are not predisposed toward necessarily, right? You are not predisposed toward scrupulosity or a real negativity. You might need to reframe. And oftentimes I think, Rose, you can let me know if there's an alteration you would make to this statement. Oftentimes melancholics, especially if they've been parented by or had siblings who had a sanguine temperament, a choleric temperament, can hear that term negative. Why do you have to be so negative? Why are you always negative? Okay. If they've heard that long enough, they start to believe that that is the essence of having a melancholic temperament, when it really isn't. They can see the pitfalls along the road they have a beautiful natural inclination toward foresight. Right? Do you see how even just framing the language changes things?
Right.
And part of the gift of being able to see those potholes is they will then make a plan to avoid them. They will solve that problem they can see up ahead. And that's a wonderful and a beautiful thing. They can turn that toward themselves and start to see the possibilities where they could go off the rails or land in a pit. And as long as they maintain that sense of this can be not solved, but this can be addressed. I can surrender this to the Lord. Behold, I make all things new, he says. As long as they can keep that perspective, I think they can avoid the trap of believing that this is who they are. They're just negative, and that's all that they see in themselves and other people.
Right, right. Okay, so a related question, I'm going to go to you with this, Rose, is somebody's mentioning that they're a choleric melancholic, but they imagine that Blessed Mother Mary is phlegmatic. And this is that comparison thing again, right? It says, not surprisingly, it's difficult for me to emulate her. Do you have any suggestions? Also, someone else is asking, can you share any examples of saints who are melancholic? What are some encouraging examples of the fact that these are neutral categories, right? That we don't have to be beating ourselves up because we have this particular temperament.
Well, it just so happens that I have I'm getting ready to sign a book contract with our Sunday visitor about the truth about your temperament with wisdom from the saints.
So
we'll have a particular focus.
Sleeve, I'm sure. Yes.
One of the saints that we know for sure that it was highly melancholy was St. Paul. He was, filled with, he writes letters to the Romans, or I can't remember. I just read this the other day in scripture. My heart will forever be filled with anguish and sorrow till the day I die. And okay, but here's the beautiful thing. The melancholy is a protector. This is why they're looking for the problems. This is why they naturally see the problems. They've been given the role. If we're all on this journey of life together and we got a leader and we got an entertainer and we got somebody keeping everybody together, we got somebody who's looking out for the bad guys for us.
Right.
And we love that. I love that. We need that. So that's the way to look at it is, and again, there's a whole nother level of things that I deal with people is that we have different parts of ourselves. You might be all melancholy, but you might have the 8-year-old part of yourself that remembers you're negative. And you have your adult part who's more in line with the Holy Spirit. And sometimes those little voices are doing this thing too. So temperament is raw material. And I love the word that you use, Kathleen. It's the essence. There's all these other things. And a melancholy knows that there's layers and layers and endless mystery of the human person. It's never ending. Yeah.
I love it. So incredibly encouraging, I think, and inspiring, this conversation. We've got a ton more questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all of them, but I think we're going to have a follow-up session on this because we're just getting started, right, ladies?
Oh, yeah. It goes on and on.
It does. We've got so many great comments and people who are ordering the books and taking the quiz. So there's a lot going on there as well. Before we have to wrap up tonight, I did share with you about Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes, which is a new offering we have coming from goodcatholic.com. And we want to share with you a little bit of more information, just a sneak peek at some of that video content that is part of that experience. So again, it's the 13 sessions with Father John Eckert. That is part of what you get with the Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes. Also, you're going to get the Everyday Miracles of Lourdes book by Marlene Watkins. Also, a discussion guide and a cultivated playlist from Good Catholic that's focused on Mary and Marian prayer. So we're going to just share with you right now. We have an opportunity to just share the trailer with you. So enjoy this little sneak peek at Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes.
In the midst of an age that was getting rid of faith, in an age where you see the seeds of communism and secularism and a sort of godless materialism that wants to throw away what's most important in life, what does God do? He sends us his Blessed Mother. It all started on a pretty normal day when Bernadette's sister and a friend of hers were going to go out and collect some firewood for the family. Well, Bernadette wanted to go too. All of a sudden, something amazing happened. Quite frankly, changed the course of world history. To know that fact that yes, we live in dark times, but they've always been dark times. But we know this, the light has come into the world, and the darkness has not overcome it. And so we're going to go through together studying about this incredible apparition, this appearance to this beautiful, humble 14-year-old girl, Saint Bernadette. We're going to study about what our Blessed Mother told her and all the incredible things that happened from it. But most of all, through this, with the help of our Blessed Mother, we're going to strive to grow closer and closer to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
All right, so that link to purchase that event is going to be sent to your email later this week. You're going to want to be looking for that, but one lucky person doesn't have to purchase that. She's going to get it for free, or he. So let me just see who we have drawn as our random winner for that Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes. We have, our winner is Deborah Reed. It looks like there are a few Deborahs on here, but it's Deborah Reed in her email. And Deborah, you're going to be receiving that. Look for an email from us with information about how you can access all of that good stuff from Moments with Mary later this week. Again, the rest of you be looking for that coming to your inbox. More information about that coming soon. All right, I promised you one other prize. This gorgeous, gorgeous image of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which is a beautiful wooden wall plaque. So I'm going to have a randomly drawn person who's going to receive one of these, and we will ship it to you in the coming week. Let me just see who we have that is our lucky winner for that one. All right, Janine. In your email, you have Janine Wine. So if that's you, congratulations. You are the lucky winner of that beautiful image. Yes, yes. So congratulations. Thrilled. Oh, there's Janine. Yeah. All right. Good for you. Beautiful way to celebrate the feast day, right? I love it. Okay, wonderful. Well, so in addition to what you have coming up to look forward to with the Moments with Mary, Journey to Lourdes, we also have the third in our summer series. So this is the second of our summer series. We've been really thrilled to be offering you these live events this summertime from Good Catholic. And the third one is going to be on September 6th. That's going to happen at the same time period, 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. And that one is going to be focused on politics. Who doesn't want to talk politics, right? Well, this is going to be a Catholic take. A Catholic perspective. So how to find peace in political times. And our talented presenters are going to be author, speaker, and pastor, Father Dwight Longenecker, and Catholic author and speaker, Isabel Brown. And it's going to be hosted by our very own From Good Catholic, Brendan Gotta, host of the Gotta Be Saints podcast. So be looking for that. I think we're going to be sharing the link to register for that in the chat. So that one is something that's available right now if you want to make sure you're a part of that third in our series of these summer sessions happening on September 6th. Looking forward to connecting with you then. But for now, I want to thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. This has been so truly enjoyable, inspiring, educational for me. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and experience tonight.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
It has been a pleasure. Yes.
Well, we're going to have you on again because this is a hot topic. I'm seeing lots of thank yous and gratitude that's coming up here in the chat box. But I want to thank you all for being a part of our summer series here tonight, talking about the temperaments. We do this for you. We do this because we want to be connecting with you. We want to be growing together in Catholic community. And your presence here is an integral part of that. We are so grateful for the fact that you've joined us here tonight. We look forward to connecting with you in future series. So that's all for now. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Take care and have a good night. God bless you.
God bless.